All right, y'all. We are looking ahead to Thanksgiving. Obviously, the Georgia Show celebrates and likes to eat. We like to let the big dog eat. And Jake Rowe and I are going to take a look today at some of the biggest turkeys on Georgia's 2022 season. The Dogs run included quite a few guys that put their proverbial feet in their mouths, and some of them are anonymous. Some of them we know their names. So I'll get the party started, Jake. I think when you look back to the preseason, there were a couple guys that work for the SEC network. I respect their work. These guys work hard, and they're former athletes in the league, so they know what they're talking about. But sometimes you reach a little too far for a hot take, and I'm looking at Takeo Spikes, first and foremost, who said that South Carolina would beat Georgia in Columbia. And I'm not really sure what the evidence was for that. I'll get to another guy that probably had a better case for his upset pick. But for Takeo Spikes, when you look at Georgia's experience and how dominant they were, I know the game was in Columbia, but it wasn't at night. It was an early kick, and the Dogs really never had any trouble. One of the most dominant wins of the season.
No, I mean, and in some ways, I think maybe the most dominant when you consider it being where it was played. And again, I know it was a noon kick and everything that probably helped out. But Georgia handled business there, and at the time it was a big game. At the time it was kind of young in everybody's season, and yes, South Carolina they needed to come in and give Georgia a football game and challenge. They weren't able to do it. You brought up the other one. You brought up the other guy.
Yeah, go for it.
Roman Harper, man. Like I get that. I would have gotten the Tennessee, and I don't know. Maybe he deserves credit for this. I would have never thought Tennessee upset Georgia in Athens preseason. I believe that's when he said it. Is that right?
Well, yeah. Look, this is kind of like a half turkey. This is like a turkey leg, because what Roman Harper really said was Tennessee will beat Alabama or Georgia in 2022. Okay. So we kind of hedged it a little bit.
I mean, well, that became by default. They would upset Georgia after they beat Alabama. That's Roman Harper's fault for putting himself in that. He gave himself a window, but then he boxed himself in from being able to do, kind of the matchup by matchup.
You got to go all in.
Yeah, you got to go all in. He should have said they'll beat Alabama and LSU. But he obviously Georgia had no problem with him, but to say that kind of preseason, I just don't know, man. I mean, I know Hendon Hooker had looked great. I thought the defense was going to be bad coming into the season. It's worse than I thought it would be. And obviously, everything's kind of coming unraveled here with, stuff Wes and I were talking about before the show. But ultimately, I just think that was such a wild call right there in the beginning of the season. And then I just think it got sillier there for a minute, and then it became kind of feasible. And then obviously never came close to happening once we got the on-field results.
Well, there's kind of a theme there on that show. I mean, you had the massive touch board. You go game by game throughout the season, and like Chris Doering picked Kentucky to run the table. So it's kind of like you got to pick the team that isn't Georgia, and you got to like cause some ripples, cause some waves. I'm not saying they didn't actually believe it, but
there's some real Georgia fatigue out there right now.
And it only took one national championship for it to happen.
And I bet Kirby Smart is loving it because there's not as much rat poison. There's not as much people. It's so funny. Instead of just sitting there and cramming Georgia down your throat right now, which is normally what they do right about right now, like this team's got a chance to do something special, and that time may be coming. They may be saving up for it. Instead of doing that, they're not talking about them at all, which is fine. I'm fine with it because, hey, come to us, come to me.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to read about, come to DawgsHQ if you want to know what's going on with the team. But we've gotten to the point, I think, where folks are just saying, no, we're not going to talk about them right now at all. And I think Kirby's loving that. So
yeah, and the other part of that is I think a lot of people are wanting to lump Georgia in with Ohio State and Michigan and TCU, and we watch this team week in and week out. If you're just scoreboard watching, you think Georgia was sleepwalking against Kentucky. They didn't execute as well as they could have, but that game was in control the whole time. I still feel like Georgia is a cut above those teams, but they'll probably get a chance to settle it on the field at some point against at least a couple of them. All right, so speaking of Tennessee, there's kind of a theme the rest of this turkey segment, at least for me. Rick Neuheisel said Tennessee would win its rematch with Georgia after Georgia put everything on the Vols that the Vols wanted and shut it down in the second half. Stetson Bennett threw 4 passes. I banged the drum about this on the Georgia show on, I think it was one of our Sunday nights or Wednesday night shows. And I just didn't see it. I saw Georgia physically dominate the Vols. They went man on defense. Bullard owned them on those corner blitzes, and Tennessee had no answer for it. And they had to put a lot of things on tape in the process. I know that Georgia had the home field advantage, but the real thing for me was how often Tennessee was penalized, even without going on the road. They're one of the most penalized teams in the country. So to say, oh, they won't have self-inflicted wounds in a potential rematch with Georgia seems silly to me because they do it all year anyway. It's a moot point now, but that was kind of a turkey call from Rick Neuheisel.
Well, I mean, your comments that night, when you talked about how I don't think Tennessee does want a rematch, and you kind of flipped the script on that, because my thinking was I watched Georgia lose 2 games to 2 teams that when you thought about it, you had no inkling like, yeah, they can win a rematch, right?
Yeah.
That Alabama, Auburn, they got handled so good that first time around that you were like, they're not going to beat them. And then I want to say Georgia may have been favored both times. Maybe they weren't against Auburn. I'm not sure. But Georgia comes back and not only wins those games, but, wins one of those games by 15 points, wins the other one by 21 points, right? So I was thinking about that. But then when you said what you said kind of about, hey, maybe this is a Georgia thing, maybe a big part of this is a Georgia thing, is kind of like hey, we learned some stuff. Try beating us now that we've learned some stuff type thing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you go back and you look at that game, you look at the South Carolina game, you think to yourself, man, if Georgia had dealt with the same circumstances as South Carolina, just in terms of weather and been able to keep the momentum going, I think it would have absolutely been a similar, score. And I don't think Rick Neuheisel nor Josh Heupel would want a rematch, even with a healthy Hendon Hooker, which it sucks that he's gone for the season. But
yeah, that's tough.
Obviously, too, we stay on the Tennessee thing. I know that you had mentioned it was going to say that Eric Ainge has got to be the worst of the worst. He's the brownest of all these turkeys.
Yeah, these last 2 are, I think, between Roe and I, these are our biggest turkeys.
Yeah.
I'm kind of picking on Harper and Spikes. They got to do their hot take thing. But these last 2 are tough.
Yeah, nobody made these last 2 people do this. Nobody said, hey, throw something out there. Nobody made this happen. And Eric Ainge, I don't know, man. Like, I kind of defended him a little bit because he was right. I feel like a little, for the time that he came through there, he was right. For what he knew, he was right. He just talked about something he didn't know anything about, because Georgia had really kind of, turned it on. They had their moments during that Mark Richt era, but nothing like some of the things that have happened since 93 K-Day, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of I don't know what it is, a little bit more energy, a little bit more pride, a little bit more of freshness. You get freshness, plus you win big, you experience some new things, you get the program rolling in a different way. And when you're ranked as high as Georgia is, you've got big games coming into town, and those games are super more highly rated than they were before, because now you're not 22 in the country hosting number 5. You're number 2 in the country, or number 3 in the country, number 1 hosting number 3, highest ranked matchup ever. I don't know how you didn't see that coming, though. But hey, the college football playoff did Georgia a favor, did Eric Ainge a disservice. They put Tennessee number 1. That added a little bit of fuel to the fire.
You called that. Of all the angles we discussed, you said that Tennessee being number 1 could be the worst omen for the Vols.
Yeah, I believe that, because listen, it was like somebody just like shot a net over that Georgia, like you see the wild animal in the movies and it's running around, they shoot a net over it, and
I've always wanted to do that.
Yeah, I know, right? It was almost like somebody shot a net over Georgia in 2017 when they made them number 1. because they came out and had a very unimpressive win after blowing everybody out. Come home, unimpressive win over South Carolina. Then they go get their teeth kicked in at Auburn. And, I just wondered if that might be the case for Tennessee, and it almost kind of has been if Georgia didn't break them. If Georgia, like I said going into that game, I was like, hey, Alabama has handled this so many times. If Georgia wanted to get considered to be in the same stratosphere as that Alabama dynasty, that so many times the young, up-and-coming, flashy team had rolled into Tuscaloosa or had hosted Alabama, and they thought we got them.
Look at that 2015 Georgia game where it was just a monsoon, and I think Georgia was favored in that game. Just wasn't ever close.
But, not even just then, Wes. 2008, even before Bama even really got it rolling. Maybe the one that did get them rolling. That 2008 blackout game. Alabama broke a lot of teams that were on the rise. And that's one of the reasons why Alabama stayed on the rise. A lot of those teams were in the SEC. Georgia seems to, the kind of the whipping that Georgia put on Tennessee seems like some things were going really well when they were undefeated. And they started getting their lunch handed to them a little bit. And some things have kind of broke out behind the scenes and in front of the camera on the field. And it's not pretty.
Speaking of not pretty, last turkey, and this is a big one. It's got all the stuffing. It's in the fryer. It's got a crispy golden wing. And I'm going to take a big bite out of these anonymous scouts and coaches before the Tennessee game. They said Tennessee. One of them said Tennessee could score 50 on Georgia. One of them said Georgia didn't have the athletes on the perimeter to score on Tennessee. Vlad McConkey laughed all the way to the end zone on that one. And I didn't necessarily think that Georgia couldn't be beat by Tennessee. But some of these anonymous scouts, man, I don't know here's a tinfoil hat that I said on our show. Kirby Smart might have been one of those anonymous coaches.
Yeah, he might have been all of those anonymous coaches.
Yeah, but that was some turkey stuff right there. That was a big
and the thing was, man, is listen, that if we want to use big green egg analogies right now, Wes, that was the test turkey.
Mm-hmm.
That was the test turkey of all these turkeys, because I had one turkey picked out of that thing already when they were talking about how Georgia really missed William Poole. And Georgia fans should appreciate William Poole. They should love William Poole. He did a great job last year, but William Poole kind of stepped away from the football team. After I'm not saying there's a correlation here, but after not winning the job at the star position. I don't know if there was or there wasn't any correlation with him wanting to step away from football after not winning a starting job. He didn't start all of last year either. But ultimately, two times in that article, Wes, it said Georgia needed to really missed William Poole. And I was like, man, William Poole wouldn't be starting on this team if he was on this team. I don't know what you're talking about. So I pulled one of the turkeys out and I've cooked it up for a test turkey. And now we get the real turkey, the big turkey, the like 27 pounder or whatever, how much ever they weigh. And that's it. We're going to have to spatchcock this thing. It's too big.
Yeah, that's a spatchcock turkey for sure. All right, we all enjoy your turkeys, your turduckens, whatever you got going on. Georgia's had some turkeys this season.
I want a turducken so bad, by the way. Sorry.
You don't like it?
I just want to try it. I want to try a turducken. Yeah, I've never had one.
You got the turkey, you put the duck and the chicken, boom.
Chicken, boom.
It's pretty good. It's just a lot of bird, that's for sure. Georgia's going to have to survive a few more turkeys, but I think they've kept these guys at bay. They've survived some of these doubts, and they've shown people that they can be the real deal when they want to be. Happy Thanksgiving. We will catch y'all next time right here on the DawgsHQ YouTube channel. Hit subscribe. Peace.